Hello and welcome to A Grain of Sanderson, a podcast where we are foolishly attempting to read all of Brandon Sanderson's work in publication order. I am joined by one Taylor Lane.
Hello.
And Jack McLaughlin.
Hello.
Today we are reading Defending Elysium and Firstborn, two science fiction short stories that Sanderson wrote. And while you could make a case that all of his work is kind of science fiction, this is the first where it's like, oh no, there are spaceships here, there's a spy thriller going on, there's some other things going on other than the usual, oh, someone's going to turn into God at the end of this book, okay. This one's gonna be kind of weird. Like, the Beachcombers are taking like a little bit of a summer break. Jack's moving. Taylor was abroad.
Yeah.
I've got just many things going on. So it was good that there's short stories instead of perhaps a Wheel of Time book. Although we'll get to some Wheel of Time books after. We'll get there.
They were short stories, and I still barely read them in time. In the tradition of English homework of waiting till the last second to do it, I was very hardcore. I was speed reading Firstborn like this morning.
Yeah, I finished Firstborn at 9:15.
Wow. Okay, well, at least, guys, I finished last night, so I feel like
Taylor, as always, is the most responsible one here.
More prepared than the two of us.
No, but we chatted a little bit before recording. I don't think we're expecting this to be a very long one, because there are two short stories. Each one, I think Defending Elysium is like 14,500 words, just barely into novella territory. And Firstborn is just under 14K words. So overall, like, even put together, they don't even come close to one of the Brandon Sanderson books we read before. Actually, I don't know how long Alcatraz is, but it's definitely longer than these two put together.
Alcatraz is at least 50,000 words.
Yeah. But as
I'm actually surprised that they're so equal. I thought that Firstborn was far longer.
I had that impression as well. For some reason, I went into this thinking like, oh, Firstborn's going to be a long one, and then it was actually a little bit shorter. So I don't know where I got that. It was, I don't know. Let's see. But yeah, as Graham said, this is the first published thing Brandon Sanderson done that is explicitly science fiction. I can jump into kind of the real quick summary.
Yeah.
Which is,
let's do our one sentence summary of
one sentence,
Defending Elysium first.
I can go first.
Yeah, because I don't got one. Again, this is our summer break episode.
Defending Elysium is all of the ideas Brandon Sanderson would hold on to for 10 years before he wrote Skyward.
I just said that the whole vibe of this was Cowboy Bebop.
Yeah, actually. Yeah, a lot of that.
Especially when he was describing how the main character looked like lanky in like a suit. I was like, oh my gosh.
Oh, you've just totally unlocked this story for me.
This is just Cowboy Bebop.
Wait, hold on. Looking up Cowboy Bebop Brandon Sanderson. He's got to have mentioned this at some point. Let's see. Yeah. He's made a TikTok about it, apparently.
I love Brandon Sanderson's TikTok.
It is remarkably good. Maybe we should do just like a short episode about like his online presence at some point.
I would have to do research for that one.
A bonus. Yeah.
Research.
Anyways, let's go into the recap.
But yeah. So the actual summary of what happens in this story. Essentially, this story takes place a few hundred years in the future, primarily on the deep space platform Evensong, somewhere towards the edge of the solar system. I believe it's between Saturn and Uranus. This is a future where while humanity has expanded across the solar system, they are still limited in their ability to go faster than light. The story follows Jason Wright, an agent of a PC agent, aka phone company agent. The phone company being this shadowy organization that through chance were the first ones to actually make contact with aliens and the first one to develop faster than light communication. They've done this through the development of psionic abilities called cytonics that they keep very, very secretive. The reason they keep it secretive is that many of these other alien species out there claim that humanity is not ready to explore the universe because they have not reached what they call primary intelligence, or have not reached peaceful civilization. The phone company is dedicated to managing the interactions with the aliens and ensuring that humanity is peaceful when they get out into the stars. Jason Wright is one of the head agents of the phone company, arrives on the platform Evensong to look for a agent of the phone company that had gone missing. He finds her, as well as runs into an agent of the kind of more like the CIA, like Bureau of Intelligence for the world government, who is obsessed with him and wants to, like, is convinced that the phone company does have faster than light travel and is just keeping them from him. A lot of weird clues and threads start coming together, including a Varvax, which is an alien that if you've read Skyward, you'll be familiar with. A Varvax corpse of an ambassador is found. There seems to be other people with cytonic abilities that keep attacking and eventually kidnapping Jason and co. And eventually, Jason discovers that the woman he came to save, who was showing signs of like insanity and amnesia, actually had died and had her mind replaced with that of a Varvax refugee, a dissident from the Varvax society that's come to hide. For much of this story, Jason is convinced that Elysium, the title of the book, Defending Elysium, that the space empire of all of these different aliens is Elysium, is heaven, is this land of peaceful people that he is trying to protect it from humanity, because he believes that as soon as humanity gets up there, they'll destroy it, bring war, violence, all that stuff. But by the end of the book, he learns that the Varvax aren't these perfect, peaceful creatures. They have dissidents, they have prisons, they have strict rules that they enforce on people, like depending on how they think. And that's when he realizes, okay, maybe it is time for humanity to reach the stars, because the heaven he believed in never actually existed. There's a lot. There actually is a decent amount that goes on in this book.
Yeah, definitely more than what's happening in Firstborn. But we'll get
this
there.
This book, I had a lot of fun with it because I've read the whole. I think it's called the Defiant. Like the tetralogy is actually called like the Defiant tetralogy or something. But the series that began with Skyward, this Defending Elysium is it's essentially a prequel to this series. A lot of lore retcons probably have happened between it, but the whole story really just felt like reading, like, oh, Brandon Sanderson had this cool sci-fi idea, and then he had those ideas just in his head for 10 years before he eventually wrote Skyward, and he carried them forward. Cytonics, the description of cytonics, mind blades, the way it's used, the way it describes faster than light travel, the Varvax, the primary alien species you encounter, and also this idea of primary intelligence, where the aliens are like, oh, when your society evolves enough, you become intelligent enough that you have a peaceful, perfect society. Humans haven't reached that yet. They're too warlike and conquest minded. And that's a huge theme of the Skyward, but that's what the whole Skyward books are basically about. So it was very fun for me to read this and just kind of like see the original bones, the foundations of what would turn into the Skyward series.
Yeah. This is also the bleakest thing we've ever seen him write. Like, unambiguously downer ending.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because it ends with Jason having this realization that, the aliens aren't these perfect, peaceful creatures. It's just like an illusion. They just say they are. So he's like, well, then fuck it. Let's let humanity out into space. And if you've read when you read Skyward, you learn that had not the best consequences for the universe, humanity being let out into space.
Yeah, I'm glad that you guys, or Jack, seemed to enjoy it. I think this is the time where I tell everyone that I am not a sci-fi reader. I don't really enjoy sci-fi that much, and I know I know Sanderson is like, how much sci-fi has he written? I mean, I think he's mostly fantasy.
I would say about a quarter of his published work is science fiction.
I know, and I just was pounding my head into the thing trying to get through this. I did not. Okay, I will say I don't like sci-fi, and I don't read murder mystery, or I don't read murder mystery. Or I guess it's a murder mystery. It's like a,
Yeah.
what did you call it? A thriller mystery or something
Thriller.
like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I also said
I
spy
don't read
thriller.
either of spy thriller. There you go. I don't read either of those genres. I don't particularly love either of those genres, so this was very hard for me to get through. I did not like this.
That's fair. I mean, again, like, a lot of this story, like, doesn't explain itself fully. And, like, eventually you do get to the point where, like, everything is fully explained. But, like, a lot of it seems like it was built around its ending. Of, like, this theme of, like, oh, paradise doesn't actually exist. And, like, let's make the selfish choice in that idea. Which, like, don't get me wrong, is a good ending. Again, very bleak.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't mind that so much because I feel like in a short story, you are, I mean, it's not the best thing, but I do think that short stories don't have the same time that novels do to really set up every single bit of world building.
Oh,
so
for
there
sure.
is a lot of crutches of the genre that he kind of was leaning on so that he didn't have to, you know, explain every single thing that was happening. He could just explain the things that were different than other sci-fi, like other sci-fi things that the audience would be familiar with. And, like, I didn't mind that.
Yeah, like, there's lots of things in here that are just sort of like, I mean, the idea that, like, interstellar communication happens because a phone company was failing and was trying to come up with, like, a new market technology is really funny. So the fact that, like, the most powerful organization in the world is literally just called the phone company. Good. That's funny.
Now,
Yeah.
on the whole short story thing, I think it's interesting because my impression is Brandon Sanderson is very much not a short story writer. There's this really funny one of his lectures he posted on, like, you know, he posts a lot of his lectures he does for BYU online. You should listeners, you should check them out if you're interested in creative writing. Even if you don't necessarily like Brandon Sanderson's writing, it's like, it's still, he's very experienced. But he, for the lecture on short stories, he brought in a different professor to give the lecture. And the entire time she's running the class through these exercises, which are like, okay, like, write this, like, write a scene where you establish someone's doing something and keep it under 100 words. And every once in a while she keeps checking in with Brandon Sanderson. It's like, Mr. Sanderson, how much have you wrote? He's like, oh, I'm at 400 words. Like, he just keeps checking in, and Brandon Sanderson has gone, like, twice as far as the actual word limit imposed. But yeah, Brandon Sanderson's not normally a short story writer, so it was interesting to see him do this.
And specifically for Defending Elysium, did you guys read the afterword, the that he wrote, the author's note?
No, I didn't. When I printed it, that didn't come up. It ends with, perhaps we can salvage something from paradise.
Yeah, mine, I was reading online, so I got to the last thing, and then it was like, author's note, and so I clicked that, and, you know, when I read books, I always read the acknowledgments or the author's notes or whatever, and so and you learn so much from that. If I could leave our readers with anything, or our listeners with anything, it's read the acknowledgments. Anyways.
Yeah.
I read the afterwards, and so he wrote this while he was still in his unpublished phase. So he wrote this, I think, before he wrote any of the novels we've read. And I feel like that also really showed to me. There was, like, things where I was reading and I was like, this just needs another pass. Like, there's, like, it wasn't as tight as anything else we've read from him. And I was like, I really felt like he needed another editor or someone, or just himself, to do another line edit pass, because, like, there's some things that were hard to read or, like, not very strong.
This is also building on that a little bit. I think this is the first book of Sanderson's that we're going to see where something he often gets criticized for, and I was kind of waiting for us to encounter it, because I haven't really felt it all that much, maybe a little bit in Elantris, of, like, really hard clashing tone, where, like, the opening of this is a spy thriller where they're going to investigate this body, and they're setting up all, like, these normal spy thriller things, but then Where's my hotel? It's fairly close to the shuttle docks, Lana replied. It's called Regency 4th. You're registered as Mr. Elton Flippenday. Elton Flippenday, Jason paused. feeling the docking clamp send a shudder through the ship. What happened to my standard alias? They're doing, like, this weird sort of, like, YA thing, and this otherwise, like, it feels out of place.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's something he often gets criticized for, but one of the weird things that we've sort of encountered is, like, he's actually been okay about tone for the most part in the books that we've read. I mean, there are some lines in Mistborn and some lines in Elantris where it's like, that sticks out as, like, kind of an out-of-place line, or, like, when there's suddenly a woman being dismembered, and it's like, that did not belong in this book. But I feel like that's something he might get criticized for later, or maybe gets worse at, or maybe this was always here and he just is now less editable. I don't know. Or maybe, like, that is a bad faith criticism of him, and, like, he's not actually doing that all that much. But it is interesting to see it here, because, like, yeah, it does feel like in a second pass that line might get cut.
I want to go to this author's note, because I pulled it up and have been skimming it, and I think I have read this before, but it's been a long time. One thing that's really interesting that comes up in this author note is Brandon Sanderson talking about the fact that, yeah, his thing is epic fantasy. And one of the interesting things about writing this short story was him trying to slip in the epic fantasy beats that he's always, like, a big fan of into the story. Like the whole ending with, like, oh, humanity's now going to go out, or these kind of big discoveries about how the magic works, like cytonics. Like, there's a really cool moment where you learn, because everyone's kind of, hounding the phone company for, oh, do you have faster than light travel, blah, 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 blah. And, like, they're trying to find out what technology the phone company has. Like, what do they do to do faster than light communication? And then the big discovery is it's not technology at all. It's psionic ability. Like, it has nothing to do with technology. In fact, it's a big reveal at the end that humanity is actually far more technologically advanced than all of these aliens. It's just that humanity hasn't figured out cytonics, which are with, like, psychic powers, which are needed for space travel. Like, it keeps referring to some diplomatic incident where humanity accidentally shot down, like, an alien ambassador vessel. And the reason the phone company rose to prominence is they were the ones that were, like, handled that negotiation. But then at the end, it reveals that, oh, that wasn't an ambassador vessel. That was, like, the strongest, most powerful warship the aliens had. And the humans knocked it out with one missile.
Which is a different sort of vibe to go for science fiction. Unless, although it's a very human-centric thing for science fiction. Lots of science fiction, especially these days, is criticized for that. Like, sort of the human-centric like, science fiction properties, of course, Star Trek, and that gets criticized for that all the time, of, like, well, all these, like, races exist in collaboration, but for some reason humans still sort of lead.
Which is actually, funnily enough, we'll see sort of the reverse of that in Skyward, because the whole opening premise of Skyward, which this is all setting up, is that humanity are not included in the coalition of all the species, because everyone's so scared of them and is like, you guys are warmongers, you guys are monsters, you guys try to conquer the galaxy, so we're going to cut you out of the Galactic Federation. The Galactic Federation, like, in Skyward, humans are the space orcs. Humans are the Romulans that are just, like, that's my attempt at a Star Trek reference, which I will admit I have barely watched any Star Trek.
That's good enough.
I'm doing my best.
Yeah, I mean, like, you hit the one that, like, is the bad guy in the what's his name? J.J. Abrams movies.
I did see that one. At least one of them.
Jack, I think you would really like Deep Space Nine and not care for most of the rest of Star Trek. We will be reading Skyward in December of 2026.
Oh yeah, almost, a year and a half. No, 2 years and a half.
2 years and a quarter.
What year is it?
2 years and
what day is it? I don't know anymore.
It is August the 11th, 2024 at 10:08 in the morning.
God. I'm starting law school in a week. It's going to be exciting.
Congrats.
I think the only thing that I kind of wanted to bring up about this was, I think we should talk about how Sanderson treats being blind in this. So our main character can only see through his psionic abilities, I guess. But we find out that he actually was going blind beforehand. And it was kind of unclear if this was like some sort of magical blindness, because he seemed very, very afraid of the blackness, of the darkness that was
that whole
coming
section
in.
is bizarre.
I know, it was out of place. It didn't fit the character. It was like you have this cool, confident secret agent, and then his like magic sight turns off and he's blind, and he's like immediate panic, terror mode, like, don't take me back to the darkness, like all that stuff.
Yeah. He was really, really freaking out, which I mean, I think he was just trying to say, like, he had, you know, how people who are not born blind and then go blind, they start to tunnel vision. And so I think that's what he was trying to explain, is like, he was tunnel visioning, and then I guess I think the assumption was that, or maybe they said it outright, was that he went to the phone company, and I think the phone company definitely took advantage of this person who was scared of his own disability and was like, we can make you see again, and gave him the psionic powers so that he could see again. And yeah, when they turn it off, he really, really freaks out, which at first I was thinking like, ooh, it's a little weird, especially for someone who like became blind. But then it started going on for far too long, where I think it's more of like an addiction. Like he even says something about like needing it back, like an addiction. Like he was addicted to his psionic powers.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And he was like dying of withdrawal, basically, instead of like dying of like being scared of the dark. Not to like downplay anything, but
no, you're absolutely right. Like he went blind, he got his sight back through psionic powers, and then the moment he was like in like a suppressor field that suppressed his psionic powers, he panics in the way someone would write someone going through withdrawal of some kind of thing. Like he's panicking, he's jumpy, he keeps talking about he'd rather die, like he wished they'd just kill him instead of leaving him in the dark. It really felt bizarrely out of place in the story. Like just the tone of it didn't seem to match what was being set up for the character. It made the character go from this like cool, confident spy to like something else, like some kind like a.
Yeah, he fell apart completely.
Yeah, to use the Cowboy Bebop metaphor, like imagine a scene where Spike Spiegel sits down to like a poker game, and like you're expecting him to like be the cool, confident Spike Spiegel we all know, and then he looks at his cards and sees that he has a losing hand, and all of a sudden just starts going, "Oh no, I'm losing!" and like says this aloud to everyone at the table. That's kind of the dissonance we're talking about here. Like, the only thing I can kind of think about here is like maybe it's some sort of like metaphor of like this whole book is called Defending Elysium. Elysium is like, you know, the Greek idea of heaven, of like if you die, that is where like heroes go and that sort of thing. So if we're taking this all as like heaven is being destroyed metaphor, like maybe this like sort of break has something to do with that, of like this is him also coming to terms with the fact that like heaven doesn't exist. But
that was not clear.
But yeah, like I don't think that's strong enough there. It's definitely not there. I'm trying to be charitable to this story.
No.
Because otherwise it's just like, this seems like it sucks for addicted people, and also seems like it sucks for blind people. Because again, like, you could be born blind or like go blind during your life and still have a completely fulfilling life. Like,
oh yeah, no, it was like he was just terrified of the dark as someone who was blind. Like,
basically it's set up as someone who he went blind slowly. Whatever disease he had very slowly took away his vision. The description was that, like, you know, it started just at night, like with shadows like getting darker and darker, and then during the day, like shadows creeping in from the edge of his vision. It was very much like a whatever disease he had, which I don't remember if the story like gives a name to it, but whatever disease he had meant it was like
No.
over the course of years he slowly went blind. And it framed it as this like he's terrified of the darkness, like the darkness has been creeping up and chasing him like his entire life, and that the psionic powers are like his, like how he, like what saved him from the darkness is how it's all framed.
Yeah, I mean, we've criticized him for his take on how he's written his disabled characters before, and I feel like this is just another extension of that, where it was just kind of strange.
Yeah.
Well, you brought up the interesting point where this was written before it. Like, this actually is the earliest written thing we've read by. Like, you know, we're reading in publication order.
Yeah.
But technically, this is the furthest. This is the earliest in terms of when he actually wrote this.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see him sort of struggle with this sort of disability writing. Not to say that necessarily what I'm about to say is an example of good disability writing, but for a man whose sensibilities so much seem to be wrapped up in, like, that's really cool, it's interesting to me that his disability writing isn't in more line with something like anime, where if a dude shows up in an anime and he's blind, he's going to be the coolest dude and he's going to be the most competent dude there. Like, that is sort of the anime school of disability thought. Or if someone has a replacement arm like Edward Elric, it's the coolest shit you've ever seen. It's like, yeah, that thing is awesome. Mm-hmm. But, like, also, even in something like that, God, I would love to do a show about Full Metal Alchemist. That'd be great. But, like, even there, like, you run into issues of, like, automail not working and stuff like that. And, like, he doesn't seem to want to engage on that. Like, generally, it's sort of like this disability is, like, a curse in some way. Which just is a shame.
I've mentioned...
I mean,
go on.
To be fair, Jason Wright, who is the blind man, is the coolest motherfucker there.
Yeah, it's true. He is.
In the story.
His name is literally Mr. Wright.
He has cool psionic powers. He actually does, like, the twist at the end is that, like, he has figured out faster than light travel, which is, like, the most advanced of all the psionic abilities. He's able to just literally teleport anywhere he wants instantly. And take people with him.
Which
but
requires him to go into the darkness, which is, I think, the only reason he had to have the scene.
Oh,
it felt very cheap. It felt very cheap because he had this scene where it was like, I'm so terrified of the darkness, and then you find out literally like 40 lines later that you need to go into the darkness to travel faster than light. And so I think that's probably why that was there, to see him be like some sort of braving the darkness kind of scenario, but it was cheap. It was not set up correctly.
What it feels like to me is actually, and this is kind of pulling from my like forward knowledge of Sky. I almost think this is going to be more interesting to talk about once we do get to Skyward. But in Skyward, he kind of keeps that theme of like the faster than light travel is like you kind of slip into this like empty nothing space. But in that case, it's framed as kind of terror, like this sense of terror because there's something else in there watching you. So I feel like he just got this like idea of faster than light travel being kind of scary because you're being thrown into this void of nothingness. And he was looking for how can I like attach that to the character's character development. Like it feels very, it kind of felt a little bit like creative writing 101, like, oh, attach the struggles to the character's internal struggle, kind of.
Yeah.
Like he had a cool idea for what faster than light travel looked like, and he was like, how do I attach that?
Yeah. I mean, the other problem is that Jason has no internal struggles. Like
other than being scared of the dark and being blind.
Yeah.
I mean,
but
that doesn't come into play though at all during the actual like the whole entire story basically until the very, very end. So is it an internal struggle? Because we just found out about it like a few minutes ago.
It's set up on, like, I printed it out, so it's pages for me. It's, like, set up on page 19. It's resolved on page 22. So it's...
Right? Like, is that an internal struggle? Because he seemed pretty competent and awesome for the last 19 pages. And he had problems.
Graham's example with Spike Spiegel was excellent in just terms of the tonal dissonance of, like, kind of putting this in here. Because there was no impression before that he had any actual problem with being blind. Like,
no, that was not set up at all.
Up until that point, it was just, yeah, he's blind but sees through psychic powers, and like there was one line about it. He like wears sunglasses because it like disturbed people when they like realized he was blind but could still clearly see. So he just like wore sunglasses so people wouldn't notice. And then there was also this line. This was actually right before the whole blindness thing, where God, what was the kid's name? Colne. Yeah, the like CIA agent he picks up, like sees him without his sunglasses and realizes he's blind, and Jason runs away in embarrassment.
Oh yeah, that was so strange.
I don't. It really felt like the whole being insecure or scared of the disability really felt like a 1-page like addition in the like.
And also, not to say that like. I'm going to go back to Cowboy Bebop as a point of comparison again, because, again, thank you, Taylor, for putting that out there, because that is totally a touch point for this book, and probably Skyward upon a reread. But using Spike Spiegel as a sort of point of comparison, we learn, like, not only who Spike is, but his baggage in the first scene he's introduced. I'm going to use the movie because it illustrates my point a little bit better, but in the Cowboy Bebop movie, the opening scene is Spike entering a convenience store that's being robbed, and he seems like completely oblivious to the fact that it's being robbed and doesn't care. He's listening to music while it's happening. And this is all a ploy to reveal that Spike doesn't seem to value any of these people's lives very much, but then he goes out of his way to save the innocent people in the store, and then you sort of realize, oh, it's not that Spike doesn't value anyone's life very much, he just doesn't value his own life at all. And you sort of immediately learn, okay, that tells you a lot about the character and why he's cool. That also tells you a lot of what's wrong with him and his ultimate struggle. I was about to spoil Cowboy Bebop, but then I decided against it. If you haven't watched Cowboy Bebop, stop listening to this episode, go watch the entirety of Cowboy Bebop, and come back.
Oh, I'll go do that.
Have you not?
Nope.
Really?
Never.
I haven't finished it, no.
Then my co-hosts have homework after this.
No, one last point, and then we can kind of move on, but one last point I want to make about the disability thing is I know that Brandon Sanderson will eventually start using sensitivity readers. And he actually, from what I've read, currently puts a lot of effort into having a very diverse cast of beta readers, specifically seeking out beta readers that like experience some of the mental health or physical disability aspects of characters he used. I know for sure he did that in Dawn Shard and Rhythm of War because I read an interview about this. Where he talked about it, but I don't actually know when he started doing that, like when he started actually using like sensitivity readers. And one of the things I'm kind of looking forward to is I wonder if we'll be able to catch when he starts it. Almost like, because I think it's one of those things where it's like whenever he like struggles with disability, to me, and you guys can disagree with this if you want, to me it just comes across as just he didn't think about, like it's just it's ignorance out of just not thinking about it, like he didn't think it was a.
It'll be something to keep an eye out for.
Yeah,
I guess we'll see.
All right, is there any last thoughts we have on defending Elysium?
We're on pace for this to be our shortest episode yet.
I have some. This can maybe wait till after Firstborn. I do have something to say in response to Taylor when you were talking about like, or when we were just generally talking about Brandon Sanderson writing sci-fi in general. Just kind of a little note, which is, I mean, I can just say it now, because it will tie into Firstborn, but I don't know if it's fully accurate. It's weird to quantify how much sci-fi Brandon Sanderson writes, because he actually only has written a couple things, and most of these are his like kind of lesser known like short story stuff that are like explicitly sci-fi. Like Skyward is his only like Skyward and arguably Reckoners are like his only real like long-term sci-fi projects. However, he does an interesting thing where as the Cosmere goes on, as his epic fantasy goes on, it starts to get closer and closer to sci-fi. But it's like a fantasy sort of sci-fi, because what he likes to do is he likes writing fantasy books, but he writes fantasy books where these societies progress. Like they develop technology, they expand, all this stuff. So it's like you almost get into this weird sci-fi in a fantasy way sort of genre. Like you will eventually see examples of Mistborn in space. And it's literally like, yeah, they're using like high tech, but it's all high tech that works off of Mistborn powers. Like,
yeah, we talked about that in our Mistborn episode.
Yeah,
I just think it's going to be interesting to kind of see, because that's a big thing he does. Like, in the Cosmere, we will eventually be getting spaceships and gunfights and like all of that stuff.
Yeah. It's also, for the record, none of that has happened yet. This is stuff that Sanderson has talked about writing, but
a little bit's happened.
Okay.
Some of his most recent stuff, like Sunlit Man, has a lot of this.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fair.
Sunlit Man being one of the Secret Project books.
And that also only like just came out like a year ago, so we'll be we won't be getting to that for a long time.
May 2028, according to the schedule.
Jesus Christ.
That one, based on what it's been pitched to me as, seems like it might be kind of fun. I am realizing that each one of the Secret Project books seems to be Brandon Sanderson has fun writing fan fiction for one of his favorite movies. And like The Tress of the Emerald Sea is Brandon Sanderson does The Princess Bride. The Yumi and the Nightmare Painter is Brandon Sanderson does Your Name, the anime movie. Sunlit Man is Brandon Sanderson does Mad Max Fury Road. Like,
that is, I didn't even think, I actually had no idea what you were going to say for Sunlit Man, but that is absolutely accurate.
Interesting.
That actually, truly, that is what this is. Like, also, but part of the secret projects are because they weren't attached to any specific ongoing contractual project he had, like, you know, finishing out the Stormlight books for Tor or whatever. The secret projects are the books where it feels like he returns to just writing for fun, which will be interesting for us to get to.
Yes.
All right.
Should we move on to Firstborn?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sure.
My one-sentence summary for Firstborn is this book was written just for the last page. This story only exists for its ending. And that's completely fine, because it's like a decent ending, although it's kind of a jarring ending. The story more stops than it does end.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But it wants to hit you over the head with its moral, which we will get to.
Right.
So, did neither of you have a one-sentence summary for this one, or is it just me?
I have a one sentence.
I have nothing.
My one sentence is, this is also a Skyward prequel, but for the starship fights specifically.
Okay, interesting.
That's fair. Yeah. All right. I said that Firstborn is an epic Galactic Empire sci-fi short story centered around Dennison Crestmar, a character who has constantly lived in the shadow of his older brother, Varian Crestmar. Decades older than Dennison, Varian is the perfect tactician and the most highly ranked officer in the Empire for the fact that he has literally never lost a battle in his life. Dennison only loses battles, so when he's assigned to a ship with a kind admiral named Kern, Kern tasks Dennison with becoming the leading expert on Varian's tactical skill through watching and rewatching his brother's old fights. After a year of this, Dennison is offered the opportunity to meet his brother in person for the first time, who had now all but conquered every planet in the galaxy. However, when Varian is presented with his Medal of Honor, he lets it fall to the grass below him. He kills their father and reveals to Dennison that he is actually not Varian's brother, but his clone. Varian goes on the offensive against the Empire, in which, with this new information, Dennison finally has the confidence to take over commanding a ship, leading half his fleet to safety, something no other commander was able to do during that attack. When Dennison makes it back to the High Emperor, he sees that Varian is commanding 10 battles at once against the Empire. Dennison decides to use the interception technology to feed Varian wrong information for crucial seconds while they full-on attack Varian's personal legions, which includes his girlfriend. The seconds are enough of a blow that Varian felt the need to pull back, even though, in my understanding, it wasn't even a full defeat. But it was enough. Live feed from the bug inside Varian's office revealed that the perfect tactician had killed himself after his first loss. And it kind of ends dead like that.
Yeah. The final line being, he never learned how to lose. For all his success, he never learned how to lose. Which, like, I think is a fine moral for a story, but is a weird place to end off on at the same time.
I'm not gonna lie.
That's a short story.
The last couple thousand words of the story are sort of a blur for me because I was speed reading them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You're right. It does just sort of end.
Yeah, I did not super understand what was going on or why. Like, my understanding was that, like, they fed him, like, the younger brother, the younger clone, fed the older clone the older brother some, like, bad information for, like, only, like, maybe, like, 15, 30 seconds or something like that. Like, or, like, a minute or something like that. Like, not that long of a time before they realized that it was wrong information. But then he, like, used that opening to, like, kill Varian's, like, girlfriend or whatever. And so then he, like, was like, I'm, like, getting, like, mildly defeated, even though he was, like, not even immediately. He wasn't, like, entirely defeated, but it was just, like, enough of a loss that he was, like...
Yeah, it was essentially because Varian, like, is set up as this brilliant, perfect tactician. Like, if he's in charge of the fight, he wins. And also, he personally manages every single minor battle his fleet does. So he's literally attacking multiple planets at the same time, and he's just in his command room, all these screen up, directing all. It's like a guy playing 10 games of chess at the same time.
Yeah.
Like literally just like directing them all at the same time, and then they cut the cameras to make the camera show like something else instead for like a minute, so that he makes wrong plays, he makes poor choices because based on wrong information. And yeah, it is weird that it's just like it set up the villain as someone who is so sensitive to defeat. It literally is like it kind of turns him from like a scary, intimidating villain to suddenly, oh wait, he's actually like a very sensitive guy. Like you had to get the high ground on him literally once, and he kills himself.
Yeah,
like it's
yeah, it was. I mean. And everyone was saying, like, in the story, like, oh, his arrogance will get him killed. And his arrogance did get him killed. A true perfect tactician would have killed his clone on that planet where he killed his dad.
Yeah.
Like, it was definitely his own arrogance that was like, I'm gonna leave this kid alive to see if I can beat him.
Yeah, that's true.
Which he could. Like, he could. If he didn't kill himself right then, guess what? He would have won the war. Like, it was literally, it's like, you had not even a lost battle. You just had a part of your plan not go right.
Oh my god.
He just had to switch to plan B. And he was like, this is too much. I'm out. Bye.
Yeah, plan D was too much.
I think we can definitively say Varian does not have the juice. Like...
He does not have the juice.
He does not got it.
And it really does, it does this interesting kind of like, it kind of turns Varian from this kind of like scary villain to just like, not. Like he's just a guy that's really good at chess, and then you like, he blunders once and you're like, haha, and then he gives up on chess forever.
or watching in the clip of Kasparov losing to Judith Polgar and him being so angry he lost to a woman.
Actually,
no.
If I may add my own cowboy, like kind of like Taylor added Cowboy Bebop, this kind of reminds me a lot of the Thrawn trilogy.
Oh, sure.
That I read.
Yeah.
Just in the sense
I'm not familiar with
it's
that.
Doing the same dissonance comparison of like Spike Siegel like suddenly going like, oh no, I'm losing. This is like if Thrawn, like if the good guys escape Thrawn, he's like, I give up, and just self-destructed his ship.
Yeah.
Like
for the record, Taylor, the Thrawn trilogy is a series of Star Wars novels that came out in the 90s. They were written before the Star Wars prequels existed. So they have a bunch of like really weird sort of archaic things that make them unique. Like, for example, in this version, the Clone Wars were fought like not like 20 years ago like they are in current Star Wars canon. They were fought like 100 years ago. And they lasted something like 50 years and stuff like that. It has all these weird little eccentricities, but the main thing is they developed the character of Grand Admiral Thrawn, who has no force abilities. He's just a dude. He's a really, really smart dude, but that is his main power is, I am the smartest dude in the room.
He's the Sherlock Holmes of war crimes.
Yes, he's the Sherlock Holmes of war crimes. Good way to put it. He's also a
Very
little
nice.
bit of a eugenicist, and also like by studying people's art, I can tactically defeat them on the battlefield, which is like kind of fun, but it's also like a little bit fraught as a premise.
It's like I've learned how the species thinks, and now I can defeat them.
Yes, exactly.
Quick, give him a Jackson Pollock.
That's sort of
But we put a Rembrandt enjoyer on our front lines. You won't expect this.
So yes, that is Thrawn's main thing, and he's been a fan favorite. But yeah, it is sort of like, again, this guy doesn't got the juice. It's just...
On a whole, though, I would say I enjoyed Firstborn far more than I enjoyed Defending Elysium.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah. Same
that-
thing of like, I think the story is pretty fraught, but like it reads better for sure.
Yeah, I found myself flying through Firstborn. I loved it. I think it made me really realize that I'm a very character-driven person, and I loved the conflict between the brother who could not stop failing. He's literally never won anything in his life. He is a loser. He loses all the time, and he hates how he loses all the time.
I love me a fail,
and he's
son.
terrified. Yeah, exactly. He's terrified to put any to take any sort of command. He's like, I'm just gonna fail. And infinitely more interesting character than that Jason Wright over there who can do, like, who's just cool as hell and can do no wrong. Like, I want to read about this guy who just fails all the time, and the conflict between him and his brother who wins all the time, he's literally never lost a battle. I loved that that tension that was instantly created there. And so I flew through this. I loved it, even though, because I loved it because it was not as focused on the sci-fi, I guess. I liked it because it was more focused on the character. It was more character-driven.
Yeah, no.
Whereas I feel like Defending Elysium, its main appeal was its, like, world, and it's that I've found not that interesting.
Yes, its world is definitely its strength, and also it's very plot-driven, like,
Absolutely.
That's the thing of, like, I wish Defending Elysium was a little less plot-driven and a little more, like, if the moment in the darkness hit and wasn't, like, a bad disability writing, like, I think that would probably have made that story, like, one that we look back on very fondly and not just look back on as, oh, here's all this Skyward lore.
Yeah. No, I really liked Firstborn.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing. I like Defending Elysium, but that was partly because I really like Skyward, and I was just having fun with the, like, ooh, this is how this was the first draft of this idea.
Yeah.
Like,
I would also say this one definitely has at least a lot of the aesthetics of an Ender's Game in here, which much in the same way that fuck J.K. Rowling, fuck Orson Scott Card, he's a shitty dude. But also kind of an important dude in Sanderson's early career. I believe Elantris has a blurb from him still. even if you go and buy a new copy.
I think
these days.
I think I brought that up on the podcast that it has one of the.
Oh, it's very possible.
One of the quotes, like one of the back of the book quotes was Orson Scott
We
Card.
recorded that episode 7 months ago. So yeah, time flies. Yes, that's one of the things of like shitty dude wrote a bunch of he wrote an 80-page essay about his homophobia.
Jesus.
Yeah. I don't know if it's quite 80 pages, but I'm also not going to look it up. Man's not worth discussing. But his books are, and there's a lot of the aesthetics of Ender's Game here, of like the holographic ship displays, that sorts of things, and like this kind of like command school that is alluded to. And also the command school we will eventually see in Skyward, because that's what that whole first book is, like Ender's Game meets... I don't know why my brain went to Aragon first, because there are better, like, Boy and His Dragon books, but that is sort of the vibe of Skyward, is like, you are meeting, it is a boy and his dragon, except it is a girl in her spaceship, and also Ender's Game, because it starts in a military academy.
Mm-hmm.
Oh. I'm excited to get to Skyward. Of all of the series of books Brand Sanderson has, it probably has the most like variable whether I enjoyed the books. Love the first book, love the second book. Actually, I think I liked most of the books, and then just Skyward Flight was weird. Anyway, we'll get to that eventually.
Yeah.
2026 and 2027.
Oh my god. I'm going to be working on studying for the bar at that point.
It's true.
The first thing that like immediately stood out to me, which I think is just like a thing of the genre that like, because I don't read a lot of sci-fi, kind of immediately stood out to me, is when this like super advanced society had like a emperor, like a high emperor, which I was like, okay, how are you going to advance that far and still have monarchy? But I think as I read through it, I was like, wait, I think this is like super common for sci-fi, for like to be like, yes, this is like a super advanced society and women are fighter jets, but yeah, we've got an emperor and he is, you know, and there's all sorts of, like, you can't do, like, monarchy exists because, you know, of certain things that, like...
No, it's a pretty common convention in a lot of sci-fi, yeah, just being, like all the aesthetics of, like, empire and, like, power and feudal and blah, 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 but then, like, with spaceships.
Yeah.
I mean, like, you know,
Yeah.
40, like, Warhammer and all of its derivatives are, like, what I think of immediately, like Warhammer and StarCraft.
Warhammer has the god emperor of the universe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm currently reading Gideon the Ninth, which that is, you know, a sci-fi book, but it has a god emperor in that as well.
I would say Gideon is a fantasy book that just happens to take place in space.
Well, yeah. They're flying around in spaceships, but fighting with long swords and necromancy. Honestly, I'm actually a big fan.
Yeah.
I'm kind of obsessed with
rules.
it.
I mean, like, I'm struggling to remember the name of the scholar, but if you want like work in science fiction studies that really gets down to the minutia of what the distinction between science fiction and fantasy is, I will put that in the episode description. But for our purposes, the main distinction that a lot of scholars draw is how much is focused on heroism. And I know that's an interesting distinction to draw.
Interesting.
But a lot of stuff that is specifically focused on heroism is often categorized specifically as fantasy. Now, it's worth noting that this person is writing specifically in response to the Second World War, and when talking about the emerging field of what we would think of as modern science fiction, and he's making this distinction from fantasy because specifically the idea of fantasy is also inextricably linked to fascism at that time, because stories of heroes are how fascism operates. Like, to borrow the quote from Starship Troopers, "Come on, you apes, do you want to live forever?" is that line of like, you'll die right now, but you'll live forever as a hero for the empire. And that is sort of one of the core tenets of German fascism, is like they wanted heroes. They didn't want soldiers. It's a, I'll put it in the description. Again, I'm struggling to remember the name of the scholar. I apologize to this scholar because I wrote a whole paper about you and I'm still forgetting your name. But he's not alive anymore. It's fine. But at least I don't think he is, given that he was writing in the 50s.
No, I think that'll be, Taylor, you and I were recently having a conversation about the differences, like what actually counts as sci-fi versus fantasy. Because I feel like most of the time you sort of operate on like you'll know it when you see it, and then there's like weird gray zones.
We talked about the differences between sci-fi and fantasy because I came out hard and I was like, I hate sci-fi. I don't like reading sci-fi. And then you were like, and then I said something like, I don't even know why they put them in the same sections. I hate sci-fi and I love fantasy.
They put them in the same section because there are a lot of books that's like, actually, I can't tell you for sure whether this is fantasy or sci-fi. It's all.
Well, know it when I hate it.
If Taylor dislikes it, it's sci-fi. If she likes it, fantasy. Elantris, Alcatraz, fantasy. Well of Ascension, sci-fi.
Facts.
I mean, like all genre taxonomy, it's kind of fake.
Right. But that's why we were talking about it. Which I feel like is relevant here because we're reading too sci-fi and I just despise defending Elysium.
It will be interesting. Like I said, as we get further into Cosmere works, Brandon Sanderson's main thing, the line between sci-fi and fantasy does start to blur. So it will be interesting to bring this conversation up. Like, for example, when we eventually get to Sunlit Man, I wonder how you specifically, Taylor, are going to approach it, because it's written the same way he writes all of his fantasy books, but they're on and there's definitely magic stuff happening, like all like those kind of conventions of like fantasy, but they're also riding around on speeder bikes and shooting laser guns. Like, yeah. So I'm really curious, in 2028 when we get to that.
Yeah, I'm also looking forward to rereading Skyward because I read the first two books, and I don't really remember much from them, and
I don't either.
I remember liking the first one enough that I read the second one, but not liking the second one enough that I read anything else other than that.
Skyward's a weird series because, like what Brandon Sanderson does with most of his book series, each book feels like a different genre of story. And I think that's a good thing. I like that, but that does mean that, like, what you were promised in Skyward might not be what you're promised in Starsight, the next book. Yeah. That's fair. Book 1 is very much Boy and His Dragon, like Graham was describing. Book 2 is a spy thriller. Book 3 is a fantasy adventure. And then Book 4 is a little more of like a grand epic sci-fi battle book. Like.
Yeah.
Oh my god, right. I'm wrong. The scholar isn't dead. Holy shit.
In which case, we wholeheartedly apologize.
I wholeheartedly apologize to Darko Subin.
He's going to be
he is not dead. However, he is 95. So,
we will be punishing Graham for this disrespect. We can assure you of this.
So he's a Canadian academic. The essay specifically I am thinking of is his essay on estrangement and cognition. And this is where he sort of lays out what he thinks makes something science fiction. I will put this in the episode description, but the two things he talks about are estrangement and cognition as those being the unique factors of science fiction, and thus he made many fantasy fans angry because you could then argue you feel cognitive estrangement in those other stories as well. And he points out uniquely that fantasy is like this thing of fascism, this thing of heroism, which I don't think is true. But I will put his manifesto in the description.
It'll be interesting to read anyway.
It is.
It's an interesting.
I'll also put it just in our chat if you guys want to read it later.
I do.
Did you have remember... like a larger point though that you wanted to like bring back into Firstborn? I felt like.
Oh, I would say that like using that distinction of heroism, I think this book is in many ways more fantasy than it is science fiction. However, again, these genre taxonomies are silly and made up. Like, okay, we're only an hour in, but do we have any more thoughts about Firstborn? I mean, like, I feel bad not giving it too much because, I mean, again, I enjoyed the experience of reading it more, but again, it's very short, and like,
there's not a lot to say about it.
I think my favorite scene in Firstborn was definitely the scene where they come down to this, like, super lush planet, and, like, Varian does, like, his whole, like, turning his back on the Empire thing. I just really love that scene. I think it was a really cool break from all of the being in a spaceship the entire time. And then it's like lush greenery and like wind on my face and stuff like that. I love that. I thought that was really cool.
I think my favorite is towards the end, where the Emperor is talking with what's the name of the fail son? Denison. But talking with Denison, and he's like, dude, you've always been too hard on yourself. Like, you're the only one who managed to, like, retreat successfully. You retreated with half your troops, and that's more than can be said for any of the other commanders. Like, I thought that was, like, a good scene. And, like, sort of the thesis of this is, like, don't put too much expectation on someone, because then they'll never be allowed to succeed, because they'll always be measured up against your expectations, which always are more astronomical than any human could live up to. Like, again, they're measuring Denison by Varian's superhuman abilities.
Yeah. And I mean, like, he specifically failed so much because he was literally never allowed to grow, because the instant that he entered the academy, he was singled out as the person to beat for no reason. Yeah. And so he was just constantly, like, challenged and failed all the time.
Wait, this was definitely an interesting departure from, like, his normal fantasy books. And we are going to be going straight back to fantasy.
That's true. We're going into Warbreaker.
Classic fantasy with Warbreaker. Warbreaker is going to... Yeah, which, I mean, this is sort of my wrap-up speech on the episode. But I'm looking forward to Warbreaker. I read it once a very long time ago and had very mixed feelings on it, but it's also sort of a fan favorite of his standalone books.
Okay. I know literally nothing about Warbreaker, apart from the fact that I just downloaded it to my phone.
Color magic.
Color magic?
It was part of the initial idea was Brandon Sanderson was literally, like, Brandon Sanderson, was already becoming known for doing, like, magic systems based on weird stuff. And someone was like, I bet you can't make a magic system based on colors. And he was like, bet. And then did Warbreaker.
Okay.
Yeah. That's what I know. Basically.
I didn't even know that.
Well, yeah. My boyfriend, Walton, he read Warbreaker in anticipation for our podcast. So I've gotten, like, the beginnings. Like, I know the setup now, which I didn't know before. But, yeah, I'm looking forward to reading it.
It's also one of the books that will become the most relevant to all the Cosmere starting to blend together in the future.
Interesting.
Really.
Okay.
But no, we'll talk about that when we get further.
Yep. I will also say a shout out to Kirk Hamilton, because he said he would probably be listening to our Warbreaker episode. So, Kirk, you're probably not listening to this, but if you listen to next episode, thank you.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting back to a novel.
Yeah.
I feel like this was hard to dig into, really.
Yes.
And especially it felt almost unfair, like I said, to even look that deeply into defending Elysium specifically, because I could tell how unpolished it was. Mm-hmm. It was like, this is not something that should be held up against the novels that we've read.
Yes, perhaps not. Should we do our rankings?
Are we adding these to the rankings?
I mean,
why not?
Why not?
I guess. Sure.
What did we read right before this? It was Alcatraz 2.
Alcatraz 2, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I wrote my rankings in here somewhere. Did I? Rankings, there we go. I mean, my rankings is, I would probably put these... God, if it does feel weird to rank these, because these are two 14,000 word short stories I'm comparing. So it's like, do I put it above Well of Ascension or not?
I mean, the thing about these is like, I almost don't want to rank them because I'm immediately going to forget about them next time I need to rank another book. You know what I'm saying? Like, these are not memorable enough to be ranked, in my opinion. But maybe we could just do like a pretend ranking for now and then not keep them on our official rankings.
That's fair.
We got the axis we're ranking them on. I'm just going to put them sideways a little bit.
I guess... Oh, God. Okay, one of the things that's going to be interesting that's changed. Hero of Ages, number 1. It used to be Scrivener's Bones. Number 2.
You've thought on it?
Well, here's the thing. I can remember Hero of Ages. I really liked the Scrivener's Bones. I can remember part of it. But it's it's only been a month, and like there's a lot of it that I can't remember. I remember there being a glass dragon mech, and that being cool as hell. And I remember the Library of Alexandria, and that's about it. Oh, and I remember Kilimanjaro being cool as hell.
Yeah, to me, I feel exactly the same way. I think that a good book, I think, is good because you remember it later on. You can't like finish the last page and then like decide that's a good book then, because I feel like all the best books are the ones that I like remember very vividly.
Yes. Well, I'm the outlier then, because I do very well remember what happens in Scrivener's Bones, and I'm still keeping it at top.
Okay, that's fair. Then the rest of my list would just be Elantris, Mistborn, I guess Alcatraz 1, Firstborn, Defending Elysium, Well of Ascension.
Mine are going to be very, very much the same.
We have a cat cam now, folks at home.
Yeah, she is being a menace near the mic, so that might get picked up.
We should post photos of Jack's cat to our Instagram.
Ooh,
we should.
maybe.
We should.
Scrivener's Bones, Hero of Ages, Mistborn, Elantris, Evil Librarians. God, I'm gonna change my mind like almost instantly, but I might put both I'm gonna put Defending Elysium above Firstborn just because, but that's purely biased by the fact that I like Skyward, and this was just like a fun little prequel to Skyward. But I'm gonna put Defending Elysium above Firstborn. Stop that. Stop eating pistachios.
At the very end? Or Well of Ascension under that?
I think I'm going to put them at the very end. I'm going to have Well of Ascension.
Yeah, I would say I like all of the books we've read more than these short stories, but I would put Firstborn above Well of Ascension and Defending Elysium below Well of Ascension.
Okay, yeah.
That's my ranks.
That tracks.
Because... yeah.
And it's quite reasonable.
I feel a really deep fury when I think about Well of Ascension. Do you guys? Because, like, I feel like that's, like, unnatural. Like, I feel like very much I am impassioned by my hatred by Well of Ascension.
I mean, listeners, if you are a really big fan of The Wheel of Time, there will be a time code in the description for you to skip to miss out on this section right here. That is how I feel about the Wheel of Time books. Although I will say, having gotten to the 5th one, I don't completely hate this one with every fiber of my being. There were sections of the 2nd one where I was like, this is okay. And then it got to points where I was blindingly mad. But yes, like this hate you feel for Well of Ascension is the hate I feel for Wheel of Time. I think like I am mostly indifferent to Well of Ascension at this point. But yes,
you've gone through worse.
If someone was like, you need to go on like if you talk for 30 minutes straight for a rant and you get like $1 million or something, I feel like that would be my topic. Like, I hate Will of Ascension so bad.
I mean, we talked about it for 4 hours.
I know! It's so bad! But, like, I have to, like, you know, I have to hold that fire in because it's, honestly, I look at that fire and it's baffling. How... It's very deep. And you know what? Yeah.
No, make your point.
Maybe I should start putting Well of Ascension higher because of, you know, good art makes you feel something, and I feel a lot of things.
Well, you said
Well
if you remember it, that's a sign of a good book. You definitely remember Well of Ascension.
I remember how it made me feel.
I mean, there's a great part of Stephen King's book on writing where he talks about it's very important to read bad books, especially as a author and writer, because a bad book can often be much more inspiring than a good book, because you can read a good book and go, I'll never do anything that good. But you can read a bad book and go, this shit got published?
Right! Yes! Yes!
Oh, God. I felt the one and only time I've ever genuinely been driven that like a strong desire to write Star Wars fan fiction was after watching The Rise of Skywalker, because I literally watched that and was like, I could have done this fucking story better.
Anyone could have written a better. God, we can't go down that rabbit hole. It's bad. I don't know how much of this I'm going to cut, but it's entirely possible I get this under an hour.
Honestly, I mean, they're pretty tiny things and straightforward.
Yeah. Anyway, thanks for listening, folks. We still don't have an official outro, but
hey, we have till January. We have till
January.
January.
I said a full
February. Oh hell yeah!
Keep combing beaches, people.
No. That's fraught.
You guys are beaches. You guys are our beaches.
Yeah, that's our fan base. They're called the Beaches.
I don't know if I like this.
Thank you to which fan email was it that started? What fan email was it that started Beachcombers?
It was Josh who sent in the message about.
All right, Josh, congratulations! You guys you're our first beach.
I don't like the implication that we're calling them another word for bitches. Also
right. No, that's the joke, but that is not real. That's not true. We're not doing that. But just
also speaking of fan emails, should I read the email from Olivia?
I thought you were going to save that one.
No. We have another one from Josh. Josh asked another question, but his is a Warbreaker question, so I'll save it for the next book.
Okay.
But Olivia just wrote in with just a nice letter. Hey, Beachcombers. And I like that someone else besides Josh used Beachcombers. It's official now. I have been massively enjoying this podcast. It's really nice to get a Sanderson podcast that is critical, because while I do love these books, I've always felt the praise for them from read-along podcasts tend to be pretty high, especially for the earlier books. Almost like they want to gather a audience of people who likes these books that are on average not literary analysis nerds or something. Being able to engage with these books was shaped a good deal of my young adult years in a way that actually makes me think about them. Theming and intention is massively entertaining, and truly why it's my appreciation for books seen through the flaws. It is hard to do a literary reading while surrounded by no readers interested in discussion, more so after moving out of academia. So listening to one will have to do. For that, I wait for my monthly podcast. The dives into Alcatraz is oddly some of my favorite, because I've not read a word of those books, but the praise and opinions are tempting me right now. But I suspect I would enjoy going in blind to your discussions on them more. I'm a sucker for a good urban fantasy with interesting powers and interactions, so maybe my will could falter. A lot of the recent episodes, discussion on books with childhood whimsy, length of books, speed of reading, in the context of an urban fantasy is maybe reminisce on some web fiction that I have a deep love for. That being Paled by Wildbow. If you're familiar, he wrote Worm, and if you want to read a problematic work with a love for rule of cool, oh boy, Worm. Between the dashed lines lay my ramblings on Pale, not required reading for this email, but I'm going to read it anyway because it's just a paragraph. Pale is stupidly long, as web fiction is wont to do, but I love love it for that, and is likely the quickest I have read so many words. I feel like that because of that conversation, I should share my love in a not quite recommendation. Pale is a story about a group of minority teenage girls, a lesbian, a black girl, and a neurodivergent girl in a rural Canadian town, becoming magic to solve a murder mystery where no one can lie. They then determine that to bring them to justice, they need to become cops, and the girls aren't really cool with that, so they instead spearhead a revolutionary action in the form of community action against the system to help the ignored and forgotten make a better world. All wrapped up with a bow of interpersonal conflict, group dynamics, leftism infighting, fascinating dynamic magic, and the power of friendship. It's only more than 2 times the current length of the entirety of the Stormlight Archive, written in the short span of 3 years. Because of that, there are sections and theme breakdowns that I'm not a fan of, especially, well, Cop and Jailer is not a great solution unless commentary, but I will always love a flawed work. All in all, loving the podcast. It's making me think and bringing back some nostalgia from recent works, so that is high praise that I feel like you deserve. So thank you for making it, Olivia. Which was a really sweet email.
Olivia. That's really
nice.
Yes,
thank you for writing in, Olivia. I know there was no question there, but I wanted to read that on the podcast just because we really appreciated it. It's just nice to get people writing in and saying that the show means something to them. We're doing this, 1, because it's fun for us, but 2, like, hearing that it has become a part of people's, like, day is really nice.
It is really nice. I agree. That's really nice.
All right.
It makes me happy.
It makes me happy, too. Again, we don't have an outro. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
All right.
See you next time.
A Grain of Sanderson is created by Graham Gilman, Taylor Lane, and Jack McLaughlin. I edit and produce the show. Our logo is by our very talented friend Ven Busby. Our theme music is Goodnight Kiss by Too Mellow off the album Midnight Broadcasts. You can find their work at twomellow.net, that's the number 2, MELLO, and twomellow at bandcamp.com. Thank you so much for listening. Oh, I suppose I didn't actually go on a rant about the Wheel of Time, but one thing I will say is fascinating about this series so far is, okay, Jack, you know how when you were reading Shadow and Claw, the Book of the New Sun, you would get to a scene and you'd have to really pay attention to know exactly what's happening.
Yeah.
So when I started reading The Wheel of Time, that is the mindset I went into it with, of like, I'm going to really pay attention to this. I'm going to meet it where it's at. And that is not the way to read The Wheel of Time, I have discovered. Because if you try and figure out what is happening as you're reading, you will go insane because the book will not explain itself to you. So, okay, here's the thing. I don't know if I've ever been as mad reading anything as I was reading The Eye of the World, the first book of this. This may all get cut. This may just be for the 2 of you. We'll see. But where I sort of came down on it was, anytime there's something happening, I have no context for it. I don't know, like, who the major players are. Sometimes characters will get introduced without context. A scene will happen, I won't know. And also, none of the main characters make a single choice throughout the whole book. Everything that happens to them. But the main character is extremely passive, even his saving the day at the end of the book. However, you finally get context for what's going on. Not at the end of the book, but in the middle of book 2. So you understand what's happening in The Eye of the World in the middle of book 2, which is a bizarre maneuver. And then I realized I can't do the thing that I do normally and close read and figure out what's going on while it's happening. I just have to wait for the next book, when inevitably what's happening in the book I'm reading now will explain what's going on. That is a new experience for me. It's frustrating to read through. The other thing that I had to sort of just give up on, I can't keep track of all these characters' names, because oftentimes they will show up for one scene in a book and then just disappear until a later book. But thankfully, The Wheel of Time is also extremely repetitious. So when a character shows back up again, they finally get the scene and the context that actually explains what's going on with them, the book will also re-explain who they were and remind me of the scene that happened in a previous book.
Jesus.
It's fascinating. I can see why Wheel of Time fans really like to reread these books, because despite the fact that I don't like them, I do think it would be fascinating to go back to the Eye of the World after reading all 14 of these books, because then I would know what was happening in the first book, and all this context that I'm supposed to have would help.
So, it's like, is it like a vibes kind of read? Like,
no, because like if it was a vibes kind of read,
that's so weird.
If it was a vibes kind of read, you would have like any sense of idea who these characters are, or every character is basically the same.
Love.
Except for the ones that are, like, leaning really hard into specific Tolkien characters. Like, there's a character in here who is like, what if Gandalf was just the hottest woman?
That is a great question to ask.
Yeah. And, like, I'm fine with that.
What if Gandalf had big naturals? Wait, that has been answered many times.
Well, I mean, kind of. I mean, like, okay, here's one of the other things of... That's weird. There is so much kinky shit in these books that's bizarre. There's multiple spanking scenes. Yeah.
Okay, so why did we give this to Sanderson?
Yes, exactly.
So how many? So you're on book 5 or 6?
I'm about to finish book 5. I have 6 hours left in the audiobook of book 5. Also, to anyone who's struggling with the Wheel of Time books, in particular, if you're listening to the audiobook and you're still struggling, I highly recommend switching over to Rosamund Pike's narration. Rosamund Pike plays Moraine in the TV show, and also Rosamund Pike is a professional audiobook narrator as well as being a professional actress, and thus her performance is extremely good. And that's no disrespect to Michael Kramer, who does the main audiobook recordings. He's also a fantastic narrator, but I think that Pike's delivery just suits the Wheel of Time a little bit more. Something about having her narration for the first 4 really helped me. The 4th one is coming out in September, so you can listen to books 1 through 4 with her narration.